Greetings, I'm Shad, and I've asserted many times that the best quality medieval sword steel was spring steel. Specifically, that you can do this with it, all right? And there's been a number of people who have challenged me on that assertion, and I have responded to them with points of evidence that we see in artwork of people quite literally doing this in the artwork, okay? Pretty direct, clear evidence that the swords depicted in that artwork were spring steel, though I have had one person, a more prominent person who makes sword-related content, actually tried to challenge even the artwork to say, what if they were purposefully bending the sword for some type of sword technique, which I find to be honestly a ridiculous assertion, because it doesn't appear in any type of fight, treatise, fighting manual, and I can't think of any reason why you'd ever want to do that purposely to your sword. No, you wouldn't want to damage your sword for a sword technique like that. But people have challenged me on that. And then I've come back to them to point out that spring steel was used quite widely in the later medieval period for crossbow bows. You know the limbs on crossbows? Yeah, we have them in art, surviving examples. The surviving examples come from the Renaissance, but we have ones that date to the late medieval period in artwork showing pretty clear steel limbs on crossbows, and you could only make those out of spring steel. And then people have challenged me on that again to say that's more of an anomaly because it's not bending too much and it's really thick, but you wouldn't really get away with that in a sword blade. And these sword blades that we have here where you can do this is a more modern kind of phenomenon. And when we look at museum examples, they are not spring swords. Well, recently a video was released where something was shown that I was very excited to see because I've never actually seen this before. So Adam Savage from Mythbusters fame has a YouTube channel called Tested, and Adam is a bit of a man after my own heart. He has a great deep love and appreciation for medieval stuff, especially, more specifically, swords and armor. And he's had the privilege to go to museum collections and handle historical swords. And recently he made a video where he was looking at, a sword that not only do I find very interesting, we actually have a sword that is based off of that very one in the museum. This is the Bayor Arms Oakshot Type 18C sword. Another name for this sword is an Alexandrian sword. It's not because they were made in Alexandria. It's that the museum piece that this sword is based off, and this isn't a perfect replica of that museum piece, by the way, but they were, a number of these swords were donated to kind of the barracks that it was in Alexandria, and there they stayed preserved pretty well. And what's really interesting, you have an inscription that also gives us a date of when they were given as gifts. And so these are European swords given to Alexandria, and the date is like 1410. So this is really early 15th century, and a good chance that, actually it might have been a bit later, was it 1415, something like that, but really early 15th century, with the possibility that these swords actually were made in, well, depending how old they were at the time. What that establishes is that swords like this, obviously, you can put a bit of room before and after the point where we can really define where this sword appears. So that means swords like this very likely were around in the late 14th century. It's really significant because the museum curator does something with this Alexandrian sword. He grabs the sword and does this with the museum piece. It's a 500-year-old sword. And they're that confident to show it has a spring temper on the sword, and like I'll show you the footage there, springing it. And not only I was surprised they would do that, but they were confident enough in the quality of the sword and how well it survives to show the spring temper on the sword. And then Adam, when he grabs it, he also does it as well. And then the curator says that there are multiple swords that have spring temper on them. Some so much so that when you just hold them out like this, they actually flex down because of the weight of the sword itself. And so hopefully we can, if anyone is questioning my assertions that absolutely there were many late medieval swords, not all of them, okay, in actual fact the majority I would still say was not spring steel, but to say it was only like a couple, one or two, or just they weren't really round or the quality was different, that you couldn't do this on them, is wrong. No. There's actually a larger number of spring steel swords than many people have tried to, I guess, contradict me on in the medieval period, because it wasn't just the Alexandrian sword. There are other surviving swords that have the spring temper still on the sword. This is remarkable for a number of reasons, because it goes into, I guess, a caution I would give people when they try and say barely any at all was spring steel. A lot of medieval swords are not in good condition in the museums, okay? Actual period pieces, you see quite a lot of rust and damage to them, and varying degrees of damage. Now, we can get certain amounts of information from these more damaged, rusted swords, but to assume that it's going to have the exact same quenching and tempering state that it had right after manufacturing is not something that I would advise people assert with great confidence, because when you have a sword that is aged and worn over a very long period of time, we're looking at 500 years. We don't know what type of abuse that sword has gone through over that entire period. And when it comes to severe rust and damage, do you think the temper is going to be in perfect, remained intact perfectly on the blade throughout that period? I would say what's more likely, no. The temper can get ruined on a sword. Now, usually the sword has to get reheated up to ruin the temper, heated up too much or any other things. But when it comes to severe damage like rust and corrosion that was really penetrating deep into the blade, yeah, absolutely that'll ruin the temper on a sword. Now, I'm not saying that means all, these rusted kind of damaged swords had a spring temper. I still believe that most medieval swords probably would not spring steel, but a good number of the highest quality ones absolutely were. We have proof in art, multiple sources from swords as well as, of course, crossbows, and now surviving examples where we have been shown the actual spring temper.
Thanks for visiting the Shadlands, the place to find quick and easy to watch sword-related content. This video was a supercut or clip from a larger Shadiversity video. If you'd like to see the full-length video, please click on the provided links, and I hope to see you in the future.